Hello, everybody. Hello, Choir of the Earth, wherever you are, whatever time it may be for you. Ben and I are honored, delighted, thrilled to have on this program of In Conversation with Nigel Short of Tenebrae. Hello, Nigel. How nice to see you.
Hello, great to see you too. Hope you're all well.
We,
All
we
good,
are.
thanks, Nigel.
Ben and I were just saying, Nigel, how we recognize that lovely room of yours from your 40 sessions of Speminalium that you did with us. Oh, my goodness me.
I know. That's kind of etched in my memory. That was the thing, like people say, the summer of '76 was when we had all the hot weather, and for me, it's sort
Summer of Spem.
yes, absolutely. It was brilliant though. It's quite emotional by the time we got to the end of it all, wasn't it?
Yeah,
Well, the,
yeah.
the, the question I have for you, Nigel, you most brilliant man of all, by the time you got to the sort of the end of it, were you either sick of Speminalium or were you actually, I kind of understand it more than I did?
Oh, definitely the latter.
Oh, good.
It's just well, it is obviously it's layer on layer on layer, and doing an hour on every single line. I'm not sure many conductors would ever do that. Um, so yeah, it was a huge exercise, and I thought to begin with, gosh, this is going to be mentally a bit of a challenge to get to the end, but it didn't lose its interest. Well, for me anyway. um, uh, no, I found it fascinating actually, and yeah, it was really frustrating that at the end of that we couldn't actually get together physically to perform it in a space. I know that wasn't the point of the exercise because that's not what the self isolation choir do, but it would have been amazing to just get everybody there and for all the detail. What was very interesting is that sopranos sat in on alto, tenor, bass
Yes,
settings,
yes.
and vice versa. So I'm sure everybody would have actually just had that little voyage of discovery into things. Oh, and look, here's an old friend that people will
There he
Oh,
know.
is.
hello, Monty.
Oh, he's got a
Oh,
present for us.
he's got, yes, he has. He's got
Hello, Monty.
he's got his favourite pillow. Don't be shy. Come on,
Oh,
come on, boy.
excellent.
This is his pillow from his bed that he sleeps in. Come on, you
This
can
is the
do
point where everyone watching the broadcast hits the like button. Forget us. Monty's here. Thumbs up, everyone. That's fabulous.
it.
Just Nigel, what you were saying there about knowing the piece really well by the end. I mean, you're right. Few conductors, other than those of us that are lucky enough to work with Choir of the Earth, have this experience. And we just last week did a week of Eric Whittaker's music, and you've obviously worked with him. You know how wonderful his music is, and I felt that by the end of that week, having taught every line note by note and having spent ages on each line, you hear it at the start and you think that's great. By the end, it's almost like you're seeing the music in multiple dimensions. It comes to life in a way that you just didn't know before. What was that like with Spem, which of course is those 40 parts?
Well, it was interesting because obviously the recording you're working with, even though you're asking for different things, the recording you're working with comes back the same every
Mm,
time.
mm,
Um, and so I just had to, you have to imagine that people are trying things out as you're going along, and um, I don't, like I say, it would have been amazing to have the experience to then conduct it, knowing what you were going after in every particular part, every particular moment, and really in the 40 lines where the real focus was. Whereas I think when you perform it live, and with every piece of music, you're there in the moment. It's impossible to sort of scan everything,
mm.
all the time, and you have to have a lot of trust with your musicians and stuff. It was a bit like this when I worked with the BBC Symphony Orchestra in a piece by Zemlinsky, and there were 100 players in the orchestra, and 40 in the choir, and there's five clarinet parts, five oboe parts, all this kind of stuff, and it's impossible to track every single line. And I worked on the score, all the rest of it, but when it comes to it, you've just got to trust that everybody is doing what they need to. So it's an extraordinary exercise, and yeah, I mean Eric's music is sort of harmonically layered and very rich, and just there's always something new to find in pretty much any piece of music, I think. Contemporary certainly, when you're going through it again and again and again. So I'm at the risk of boring yourself by doing that. It's what I would recommend to all young choral conductors. Is just to let something seep into your system by going over it again and again and again until you know it inside out.
Yeah, it's a bit like obviously Bach and Handel. I mean, one of the first things they did was copy out all those concertos by Vivaldi and Corelli, and just to really study it note by note, wasn't it? So that they had an understanding, a real understanding of that unique sound. Actually, just the video at the end. Did you ever see the 40 Nigels?
Uh, I
It's
I
quite
think
something.
I think I saw a picture, but I didn't fancy watching 10 minutes of
No,
myself
no,
40
fair
times
fair
over.
enough. But just to say, I've shown it to a lot of people, and I showed it to somebody in particular who has done a lot of work with the deaf community, and she burst into tears watching it. She said, "This is," and please don't get too big-headed. She said, "This is beautiful." I think what she was referring to is, rather than 40 wonderful representations of your very good-looking self, I think what she was talking about is the fact that you could follow
I
the
hear you,
music
Ben.
in a visual way,
Yeah.
and it was moving from sort of left to right across the screens. Different choirs came in, and then of course Respice, bang, 40 Nigels all doing this, and then it fades out and fades in. And she said she'd never seen a more um, expressive way of visualizing music. You could watch the whole thing without hearing a note and still understand what was going on musically.
Oh,
Yes,
So
I think
nice.
when we put it together,
Oh,
Nigel, what it was almost like a ballet, if you see what I mean, because your hand, of course, is going like this in exactly the same beat 40 times, and across the screen, it's almost as if it's sort of magical. Um, Added to which, of course, as Ben says, when you get to Respice, your visual expression changes because that's the time in the music when it's just amazing. So I completely understand that you won't want to watch it, but it really is. It's a very special bit, and
oh,
it's the sort of
exciting.
thing, Nigel. I think that only we could do because there's no other choir. I think that, or well, that's not true. There are a few other choirs that can do this sort of thing where everybody can sing as many parts as they like, and we put it together and have over 2,000 voices singing at one time. And we thank you for your time and patience in getting us through to the end.
Well, what we should do is plan to hire the Royal Albert Hall and then get everybody there and do it one day.
What a
You could
very good
probably have a
idea.
balcony, all
oh, that
40
would be
parts.
amazing. That'd be amazing.
That would be. Would you be up for
Absolutely.
that, Nigel?
Oh yes, God,
Great.
that'd be a once in a lifetime.
It
Right.
would. Although bear
So,
in mind that the sorry that several of the people involved in the SPEM recording, they that one of the things they loved is that they recorded 8, 9, 10 parts, and so you had 500, 600 singers produce more than 2,000 recordings. So you'd have to kind of consider how cloning people or something in order to get the same volume that you had with that end recording, because it was again a unique sort of experience where you can sing tenor 1, 2, 3, 4, bass 1, alto 5, whatever you want.
Yeah, yeah.
It was great. It was really, really something.
so Nigel, how is Tenebrae? Have you had a busy time now that the pandemic is beginning to come to an end?
Yeah, crazy, crazy.
Good.
I mean, I'm very happy to say that we've come out of the pandemic. Maybe we even, endured the pandemic with a level of success that not many other groups managed of a similar size. But we were very active, trying to put stuff out, content online. We seem to have come out of the pandemic all guns blazing, and
Good.
it's our busiest year ever. I
Great.
remember 5 or 6 years ago saying, well, if we get 30 concerts a year, that's marvelous. and within 2 or 3 years we were up to 60, and then the pandemic hit, and this year we've had about 75 concerts.
Wow.
And it's absolutely bonkers. We're going to the States in November, and then again in March, and then we're already talking about doing another tour in the autumn of 2023. So the interest in what we're doing, which is very reassuring, at a time when you worry about the arts, all arts, and culture, especially in the UK with our current government, things seem to be flying, and the interest is good. And we've noticed in our audiences that we've got more and more young people turning up, and
Wonderful.
that promoters is really exciting. So we've been to the Wigmore Hall a lot, and they say we get the youngest audience of any of their artists. So
Wow.
and that is starting to change, and that's really exciting.
So what does that tell us, Nigel? Does that tell us that young people are beginning? I mean, Ben and I have said on a number of occasions to each other that Messiah or Vivaldi's Gloria was written in 17 something or other, and is still performed in the same way 300-400 years later. So there is always a new generation of choral singers coming through. So do you see the young is obviously a tremendous thing, that those are the audiences of the future?
Yes, I mean, I think a lot of choirs have excellent educational programs now, which is designed to draw kids in. Um, Access to choral music is so much easier now with the internet and
Yeah,
Spotify and these kind of things,
yeah.
which definitely helps. Um, and I think as a senior artist, I've always thought, well, certainly in the last 10 years, thought of myself more as a custodian, if you like, of the art, and that we're carrying this sort of precious thing. And yes, we're working with it at the highest levels at the moment, but it's actually our job to look after it, grow it, and then hand it on to the next generation, so that everybody can, who is interested, can enjoy it. And that seems to be, that kind of feeling seems to be in a very good place at the moment. Yeah, lots of youngsters coming to concerts. I think it's also um, maybe the pandemic has taught a lot of youngsters as well that experiencing things online is different to being there in the space and experiencing it physically. You get a visceral experience which you can't possibly get when you're just watching a computer sing it at home whilst you're eating your cornflakes or whatever. Um, and that's very good for live music, for the arts going forward. And I think we just need to keep encouraging, coming up with programs that are obviously attractive to youngsters. All the various groups are improving their marketing techniques again, which just is helping youngsters see what's on offer and drawing them in. So I think it bodes well for the future. And of course, there are lots and lots of small groups that the pandemic has kind of helped spring forth. But a group like ours, 20, that's a difficult thing to get together, either online when you're all sitting at home working on Zoom, or physically. So maybe more young singers are realizing just how special it is to have a choir like Tenebrae or the 16 in a space performing live. And long may it continue.
Yeah, well, I mean, we've found that people still enjoy coming to see us, coming to see our courses, and maybe the ultimate, Nigel, is that whilst we as an online choir will never replace the face-to-face concerts, maybe we can see that for certain projects we can all work together, that we can bring the music to people in Australia and New Zealand and America and Mexico. And I mean, when we did, as you probably, I've bored you so many times, when we did our Mala H, the children's choir was recorded in Mexico. And so it's a wonderful way of getting music out to people who cannot come to the Wigmore Hall, or cannot. And if we can all work together as an industry, if you like, to sort of work, not one replacing the other, but
No.
saying to each other, look, if we can do this together, if we can harness the advantages of both, then wouldn't that be wonderful for getting music out to everybody?
Absolutely. I mean, and especially what we do is quite niche. And there's always a danger that it comes across as a little bit too esoteric. And I think we have to break down barriers. And the pandemic and the work you guys did in creating the self-isolation choir was absolutely spectacular in making it the whole thing inclusive
Mm.
rather than
Now, Choir of the Earth, Nigel. I just sort of slow
sorry.
that one in, but no problem.
But making the opportunity of singing this music, and along with some of our musicians, um, a possibility for anybody. And it was very moving, sort of always seeing the chat. I mean, the bits that I could focus on because that was
Yes,
sort of down
yes,
all so far.
yes.
Um, people that saying that they've never had the opportunity to sing this music before or work with professional musicians, and it was like sort of opening a door of opportunity to a new audience, and it was extraordinary. And long may that continue. And I
Mm.
think, yeah, you're absolutely right. Tenebrae or all the professional groups need to work with guys like you to try and create more opportunities to bring people in from all walks of life. And of course, the one thing that I found really moving was, you know, disabled people that are not able to go to a choir practice every week, whatever, who might love singing, and they actually can't do that. And your opportunity through the pandemic suddenly brought them into a sort of an experience of being a regular choir member and all the social benefits that
Mm.
has brings along
Mm.
with it. Um, was spectacular. It was a really, really good thing. Um, and
Well,
we just
I must stop monopolizing the conversation because I'm sure, Ben, you want to ask Nigel a question or two. But I just want to mention, Nigel, that we decided quite a while ago that meeting together as an online choir would be difficult because there are lots of people, for whatever reason, would not be able to make it.
yeah,
And we won't go into what reasons those might be. So Ben and I have decided that rather than ask people to come to us, we will go to them. And so on October the 22nd, we start our Messiah tour, where we are going to London, Bristol, Cardiff, Norwich, Birmingham, Manchester, Edinburgh, Belfast, Dublin, with a Messiah come and sing. And it's just going to be so much fun because rather
oh,
than expecting everybody to come to us, we have decided let's outreach Messiah. And we've got some very interesting requests from America, Canada, Australia. I had a very interesting email from Perth yesterday saying, please come and see us. So that again, that's a sort of an interesting
Perth,
twist on
Scotland, or
how all
Perth,
this works.
Australia?
Sorry?
Well,
Perth, Australia, or Perth,
That's right.
Scotland?
No, Australia.
no, Perth,
Wow.
Australia.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. No, so well, but one thing I just want to chime in here with is I've been having a lot of conversations. We had a chat recently with dear Patrick Hawes, who we're all very familiar with. What a lovely chap he is, and there's a lot of interesting stuff around this art form of digital music. I think a lot of people sort of dismissed what they called virtual choirs and online choirs as to, well, that was just during the pandemic and now it's over and it's all about live music, which of course in some ways it is, and it has to always have that, as you've said quite rightly, that live focus, that visceral experience. But I think there's a huge amount of very interesting work that could be done in taking what we started with, this kernel, where we went into lockdown and suddenly how are we going to reproduce this experience of singing as best we can using this technology, and turning that into, well, how can we make this become its own art form? And we've spent the last 2.5 years really trying to, in our final performances, recreate the sound of a choir standing in front of you, possibly in a cathedral space. When you put your headphones on, you wouldn't know that it's people singing into their phones. It's totally convincing. But my dream really is to see, well, how far can we push this? Rather than trying to replicate something, what what are the extremes of the art form? How interactive can we make it? Can you make it so that every time you listen to the piece, it is different? can you have control? What if everyone listening had, for better or for worse, had the ability to affect the sound of the choir through levels, through dynamics, through volume, through timing? You know, there's all sorts of really interesting things I think that are going to come out of this as we start to see Choir of the Earth and these other groups kind of blossom and become their own separate art form. And I was talking to a university friend of mine who said actually that's a very interesting point. The early days of filmmaking were all about producing something that people would recognize. So the earliest films were just filmed plays. They all looked like stages and people coming in and using all of that kind of stage vocabulary. But it wasn't until artists like Georges Méliès and then Orson Welles to sort of really take the form and say, no, this isn't theatre, this isn't film theatre, this is something different. And I just wonder what you think, as obviously someone who's been in music your whole life, but has interacted with digital music making, I think more than most. You know, what do you think about that as a possible future?
Well, it's inevitable that people are going to push the boundaries, and that's great. I have to say, personally, I'm quite excited by the possibilities for composers in looking into all this technology and how they might be able to bring audiences and performers together. The sort of the bugbear is the technology, in how good can it be. But my guess is, that the pandemic has accelerated a lot of the technology in this regard. But are we actually not very far away from being able to produce a performance where everybody's at home, like you say, it goes through a board and then it can be played in a building, and it acts as a live performance. So you could do a Matthew Passion, and you have a chorus from South America, followed by a chorale from Germany, followed by an aria from Norway, and it goes together as a genuine thing. But that's kind of just with old music. But you could, I'm sure, there's got to be some young talented kids out there that are sort of looking at all this, trying to dream up ways of writing new music, and I think it's amazingly exciting.
Fabulous. Yeah, well, I mean, that technology in some ways actually already exists. What's called low latency connections, or LoLa. There are various universities around the world who are connected with
well over my head,
ridiculously fast internet connections, and there have been projects where you have string quartets with musicians. Each player is hundreds of miles apart, but they are playing perfectly together over a live connection. And the current estimates are 2 to 3 years for this to be more widespread, and within 5 years, when we're looking at, forget 4G, when we're looking at 6G connections on our phones, they will be fast enough with low enough latency for exactly that, for us to have a choral performance where we have every possible choir from all over the world singing together. And you forget choir of 1,000, you can have a choir of 1,000,000 at that point, everyone all singing together, and that excites me, I think, more than pretty much anything.
Yeah, the conductors will have to be rather good, though, won't they?
You just need one, and you need a camera. That's the advantage of it all. Forget
Nigel,
sight lines. It's yeah.
I think history relates to us that the human being never stops being creative. The human being, I mean, who would have thought that a man would say, well, I think we'll go to Mars, and I think we'll make a colony of human beings on Mars. Now, 10 years ago, people probably thought Elon Musk was mad. I bet now, if you did a survey, there would be a number of people who would say, well, actually, maybe. And I think that we never stop being creative. We never stop finding new ways of doing stuff. I mean, it wasn't that long ago that I remember being terrified of putting my credit card even into an online web shop. But and now you don't think, and you just don't think. So these things just become part of what we do. And even if it's a bit sort of far-fetched today, it's something that we must not ignore, because our children and our grandchildren will probably say, do you mean you used to drive cars? Oh my God, what?
Yes, how do you do that? I mean, historically, of course, the arts have, in adversity, always thrived. They've
Yeah.
always found a way of surviving. And interesting that, the pandemic, interesting that Tenebrae has come out of it with more
Yes.
gigs than
Yes.
ever.
Yes.
You know, that would have been very hard to predict, but you do find ways, yes, human creativity, but actually, the arts actually thrive. Sometimes,
Yes.
I hate the British government to sort of think, they could suppress their support for the arts even more, knowing that we would probably find a way around it and still survive. But the arts do, and we're creative human beings, and you know, where there's a will, there's a way. And with music, it's such a rich um, thing for everybody to enjoy. We need to sort of keep encouraging all the youngsters to sort of
Yes.
push the boundaries and come up with new ideas.
Well, of course, one of the great things about singing is that it's certainly in terms of your instrument is it's free.
Mm,
Everyone has a voice. And I still remember those first couple of days of the pandemic. I'm sure we all had the same experience. My phone was lighting up every 2 seconds with a forwarded WhatsApp message from a friend, and most of the things I was getting were songs that people were writing, were bits of music that they'd put together, kind of expressing the frustration at trying to be able to buy toilet roll and what have you. It was all silly stuff, but it's exactly what you were saying. In great adversity and in times of struggle, what comes forward to to raise everyone's spirits, of course, is music and mostly singing.
mm, mm.
Um,
Well,
Nigel,
I'm
sorry.
still excited by the idea of somebody uh, coming up with a technological way for Tenebrae or any choir really to perform in some of these great spaces. Just before the pandemic, we were lined up to go to Ely Cathedral, and one of the pieces in the program was Speminalium, and we'd worked out where each choir would go, and that there would be monitors there. And then, at the last minute, they said, "Oh, but how are we going to sort of make sure that everybody stays in tune? Because if they're listening to the choir down there, by the time it's travelled 150
Mm,
feet down to the other end of the building, they'll hear the pitch slightly lower because the
mm,
Doppler effect.
mm.
And so, how can you do this? So, where there's a will, there's a way. Somebody will
Yes.
come up with it that we
Yes.
can. You can have a monitor where I'm conducting. Again, you'd have to create a network. I'm sure the technology does exist, but it's probably expensive to set it all up. But Path of Miracles by Joby Talbot. I want to perform that
Mm.
somewhere like Ely, where you have the sopranos up in the triforiums and the basses in the crypt or something, but the whole thing comes together in the cathedral. And
Wonderful.
sort of move them around, but you get these little microphones, which, I used to use when I was a king singer about 100 years ago, and they're pretty. They were pretty frustrating because they were, well, it's a bit random, I think, and the technology just wasn't very good. So the sound quality by the time it came through a board was a bit ropey. But these days, I mean, who knows? You could whether you wear a little headset and you have a microphone where all the singers are the same distance,
Yes.
Mm.
and you
Yes.
can program it, and it goes through a board, and then wherever they are, everybody's performance comes together in a sound where the audience is, and then bit by bit, singers can arrive, all this kind of stuff. But
Well,
that's the great thing about technology, and the pandemic, I think, has accelerated all that kind of that thinking about what might be possible.
well, thinking out of the box here, Nigel. Ben, tell me if this is wrong. We did all those voice louder tracks for Speminalium. What is to prevent you or us playing the voice louder track to every individual performer, so that they've got a little bit of help in their ear, and then everybody might be able to sing together and in tune?
No, absolutely nothing. It just requires, as Nigel said, everyone would need to have a headset. There'd need to be a central point that this was played from. It's the same as if you were doing things to click tracks. I mean, orchestras
Yeah,
do it all the
yeah,
time. You have an earpiece and the
A
sound is
guide
playing.
track, yeah.
I mean, one of the things I still think is fascinating about using what we've got currently. I mean, we're talking kind of about what might come a few years hence, but we've got 2,000 plus recordings of Spem and Allium effectively sitting in the warehouse. We mixed it and we put it out to the world, but the way we do things is different. You could go back to those recordings theoretically this year and completely remix it, put it out spatially, bring certain voices forward. You could add to it. You could say, right, let's run this. We're going to put all of Nigel's teaching up again, just literally just redo them. And, without you having to actually sit there and do it again, Nigel, we just put the videos up and people watch them.
Oh, shame.
You'd be very, obviously, if you wanted to do all 40 again, but I suspect your family might find that a bit of a challenge, speaking personally. But then, you could have a sort of reopening the piece every year and have people submit new recordings and grow it and remix it. And it's, this is something you don't normally get with choirs. If you do a piece, that's it, it's done. You sing the concert and people go, is that it? Yes, give us your score back. We're starting new music next week. But with these digital choirs, it's not like you do the concert and it's done. The pieces are all still there. The recordings are all still there.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's just a matter of getting them out and you can revisit them. I mean, we've had discussions about what would be very interesting is if you could kind of work out a virtual reality environment where you could put on a headset or these augmented reality glasses, put your headphones in and move through a three-dimensional virtual space. And as you're moving around, you're sort of, right, I'm approaching, as I'm moving forwards using my controller, I'm approaching choir 1 and they become louder. And actually I can move to choir 6 and you can actually experience a piece like Spem and Allium. And this is what I was saying earlier on. Every time you were to do that, obviously the recordings would be the same, but your journey through it would be different. I'm going to start this playthrough. I'm going to stand right by choir 8 and I'm going to make my way to the middle and then I'm going to go and listen to choir 1. So Amazing. It would be completely different every time. And that's doable in current technology.
Wow.
Amazing.
I just think it's a brilliant art form. Go on, Mark.
Nigel, it's been a real pleasure to talk to you. Do very briefly tell us, before we disappear to our busy day, about your young people's program for Tenebrae, because I think that's really, really, really inspiring.
Yeah, it's a program of encouraging young kids in sort of schools that don't have any music provision, encouraging them to start singing. And we started to bring a school in West London. And in this particular school, there are 26 different languages spoken, and 90% of the children there, English is not their first language. Wow. And from all sorts of diverse backgrounds. And we've started this program where we go in every week for 6 months. And we basically come up, we create songs with them. We find out what they're good at, what they enjoy, and then we teach them how to sing, hopefully help them, to learn to love to sing. And then at the end of it, we do a performance. And we've just now got more support to take that into another 3 schools. And our associates go in. The whole of Tenebrae goes in at the beginning of the 6 months, sings to them, sort of, wow. And a lot of the kids sort of go, "Oh my God, they've never heard anything like that before." Yes. I go and make them sort of play games with them, all the rest of it, and just work with them over and we help the music staff kind of work out, how they can encourage the kids to sort of develop their musical skills and talents and all the rest of it. And the idea is that, in 10, 15 years' time, some of these kids will still have a love of singing, hopefully all of them, but some of them will find their way to the upper echelons of choral singing and, be in a Tenebrae line.
Well done. I think that's a wonderful, wonderful thing. Anything that can be done to encourage people to enjoy this marvelous way of human interaction is just absolutely marvelous.
Safeguarding that young audience of yours as well.
Yeah.
They'll be getting younger and younger.
Yeah.
When you go to the Wigmore Hall. Fabulous.
Yes. Yes, unfortunately, even the singers are getting younger and younger these days. I've just got back from the St Magnus Festival in Orkney, and we took our six associate artists, and I mean they're an awful lot closer to my daughter's age now than they are mine. So it's like going on tour with the kids.
Well, it's a testament. It's a testament, Nigel, to what you've done. That you've got such a great depth
Yeah.
of talent with you. So, well, look, Nigel Short, thank you so much for spending a few moments with us. We've absolutely loved it.
Oh, my.
And so, Nigel, for the moment, thank you very much and goodbye.
Thanks, Nigel.
Thanks, guys. Nice to talk to you as always.